Hi, I'm Willie, and I am an alcoholic. And greetings to all of you that have been here and the new ones that I have seen come in this morning and late yesterday afternoon. I'm glad you're here. It's such a good, warm group. Y'all don't know what you do for us, how much you help by being interested in what we're trying to do. And we're just so grateful for you being here and your being so attentive, and sometime I know the back end's getting pretty worn out, but you're hanging in there, and we're all so grateful. I haven't found it necessary to have a drink of alcohol since June the 19th, 1957, and for that I am so everlastingly grateful, which I hope and pray comes through every time that I talk at a meeting, whether there's 4 people or 3. Whether there's 3,000 or 4,000, it doesn't make any difference. I want that gratitude to come through. I don't want to just talk about it. This program is my life. I stay busy doing a lot of other things because I like living out there in that world, even if it is troublesome and quarrelsome sometime. I like living out there and mixing it up with them. But what's in this room is my life. This afternoon we're going to consider step 8 and 9 together. And from our 12 and 12, because as I remarked last night, Charlie and Joe do such a beautiful job of telling us what the big book has to say about our steps and the clear-cut directions that the big book gives us. But this book was written, the 12 and 12, 14 years later. So there's a little more detail, and that's what maybe will help some of us if we look at it together. In this 4th step, I think our basic, not the only, but our basic principle behind this step is unselfishness, step 8, of being unselfish, to make sure that we take those other people into consideration. Okay, we make a list of all the persons that we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Steps 8 and 9 are concerned with personal relations. As I told y'all last night, I can't talk without the teacher in me coming out. And I always bring to the teenagers, consideration when something is listed 1, 2, 3, then look out, because I'm going to ask about it on the test. Because if they thought enough of this fact to put it in 1, 2, 3 order, it's important. In this paragraph, we have listed 1, 2, 3. So let's look at it together. It says, first, we take a look backward and try to discover where we had been at fault. That's the very first thing we do. Where we had been at fault. With the list that we have with our 4th step in hand, we look back there at that column that talks about, where were we at fault? And as I said, I had changed so much from the woman that this man had married. I had to look back and see what I had done to him as a human being. I had to look back and see what I had done to this marriage. What I had done, not what he had done in retaliation, not the circumstances, because I had all these things made up in my mind. If I'd stayed back there in Spring, Texas, and married a good old farm boy, I wouldn't be in this mess. So you share some responsibility for it too. You moved me into this fast lane. So I had to look back and see, you could have moved into this fast lane and been there with somebody else. You can't look at this man and tell him that he is responsible for this. That's wrong. I had to look at my part in it. So that was number 1. Next, number 2, we made a vigorous attempt to repair the damage that we had done. And third, having thus cleared away the debris of the past, we consider how, with our newfound knowledge of ourselves, we may develop the best possible relations with every human being that we know. Now, it breaks my heart sometimes when I see a new woman come into Alcoholics Anonymous and she gets sobered up and she sort of begins to blossom and she starts being kind and considerate and sweet to the people in Alcoholics Anonymous. And then she tells me after 3 or 4 months of these problems that she's having at home. And I always say to her, are you taking any of this sweetness and light and taking it on back home? Are you repairing some of the damage? You can't just sober up and let everything try to fall back into place. You have to make some definite attempts. And when we say every human being in that paragraph, it means every human being. Even the people that I don't care for so pretty good. And if we are out there in that world mixing it up with all those people, we're going to run into some. I'm knee-deep into politics, and our general election is coming up in November. And I am up to here in politics, and I meet some folks that I don't like so pretty good. But see, I have to remember that they're one of these human beings that I have to have the best possible relationship with these people. It's not important that they have to know that I don't like them. It isn't important that I have to make that very clear to them. It is important that I have to establish the best kind of relationship I can with them. And not only the people that I'm working with in the outside in various groups and organizations, not only with my people at home, but with people that I meet every day of my life. Grocery clerks, clerks in the drugstore. I have to put forth the best possible human being standing here that I possibly can to that person, because that clerk is important. And the reason why she's important or the reason why he's important is because he is another human being. Maybe with a whole set of problems that I don't even know about. And it makes me feel so much better about myself if I take the time to be extra courteous to that person. Even if they just got through telling me, that I should know the price of something when I didn't. Because maybe they're having a bad day too. That doesn't mean I have to turn into any kind of floating saint, because I'm scared of that sainthood. Besides that, I don't think I'll ever make it. But I'm scared of it. Because, there's just 6 inches between a halo and a noose. So I'm sort of scared of that sainthood. But I can be pleasant to that person even if they've been rude to me, because of that sentence there. I have to establish the best possible relations with every human being we know. This is a very large order. It's a task that we may perform with increasing skill, but never really finish. And I think that's a happy thought, because I can keep on and on getting better and better at something. See, if I want to get real down, I can think, over half of my life is over. And I can sit around, stewing about not being young anymore. Or else I can think, I have a job to do. And the book tells me that if the more I do it, the better I'm going to get at it. So in the years I have left, I'm going to get as good as I possibly can at it. And that's my human relationships with people. So I have a goal now. I don't have to look back and say, I wish when some of these gals come flipping in, in their 20s and their 30s, and I think, oh, ye merciful heavens. I wish I had that swing in my walk. And a few other things. But see, I don't have to waste any time. I don't have to live there. I can think, I have a lot to do. And there's time enough to do it in, and if I keep this promise in mind that I'm going to get better and better at it, and that it's a job I'll never finish. So I'm going to, when they plant me 6 foot under, I'm still going to be working on it. Because you better check, every one of you, and see if I'm not smiling. I've already arranged it. I'm living ahead of myself. Okay, learning how to live in the greatest peace and partnership and brotherhood with all men and women of whatever description is a moving and fascinating adventure. I don't know. I sometimes feel so terribly sorry for those people that I was talking about last night that sit and say, I've been sober 20 years, and it's a joyous experience. The poor newcomer, see, he's just walked in, and he meets this old person here that's sitting there like he's just been hit in the face with a dead fish. And he says, you're going to love being sober. I love those two words. This is a fascinating adventure. And we're on it. We're on it. I sort of like to think of it as like packing for a trip. God, how I love to pack for a trip. All of the excitement and the adventure is in front. I don't like to unpack, but I love that adventure feeling that, okay, I'm going to get on that big bird and go. And that's sort of the way I feel about Alcoholics Anonymous. That's the opportunity that it gives us. We have a beautiful journey in front of us. And if we can either make a chore out of it, and we can take that word trudge, the hard road. And I know that Bill didn't mean that word the way that some people have taken it. But evidently some people have taken it really to heart, and they're trudging. But I like to consider as, skipping and hopping in this great adventure that we have with each other. But I'm not ever going to forget you people. And that isn't just a bunch of words. You that were here last year, I haven't forgotten you. You have no idea what I remember about you from last year. Peggy? You talk about a beautiful, fascinating adventure, and that's to see that beautiful young woman this year. And to see what has happened to her. And that isn't the results, people, of just getting booze out of her system. That's not it. That is not all that Peggy has done. Not by a long shot. She got on this adventure last year, and she's been on it. And with the problems that life has confronted her with, she's still on her adventure. She's still looking forward. And if that isn't a beautiful experience to share with people, I don't know what a beautiful experience is supposed to be. Every AA has found that he can make little headway in this new adventure of living until he first backtracks and really makes an accurate and unsparing survey of the human wreckage that he's left in his wake. To a degree, he's already done this when taking moral inventory, but now the time has come when he ought to redouble his efforts to see how many people he's hurt and in what ways. This reopening of emotional wounds, some of them old and some perhaps forgotten, and some still painfully festering, will at first look like a purposeless and pointless piece of surgery. But if a willing start is made, then the great advantages of doing this will so quickly reveal themselves that the pain will lessen. It'll be lessened as one obstacle after another melts away. These obstacles, however, are very real. The first, and one of the most difficult, has to do with forgiveness. That's the first step in our journey, in this step. Forgiveness. The moment we ponder a twisted or broken relationship with another person, our emotions go on the defense. To escape looking at the wrongs we have done another, we resentfully focus on the wrongs that he has done us. This is especially true if he has, in fact, behaved badly at all. Triumphantly, we seize upon his misbehavior as the perfect excuse for minimizing or forgetting our own. And that is so easy to do, and I don't think that's because we're alcoholics. I think that has to do with our human beingness. Every morning when I get up and I look in the mirror, it's getting to be bigger and bigger a chore. But you know, I heard two old gals one day down in the first row, and one of them turned to the other and said, I'm so sick of hearing all this gratitude bull that they keep putting out. My husband left me, and he left me without any money, and here I am in my 60s, and, you know, I can't find another man, and blah, blah, blah. And the other little old lady was just sitting there with the cutest little smile on her face, and finally she turned and she said, well, honey, why don't you just be grateful that wrinkles don't hurt? But I look in that mirror and I say, the first thing I say to myself in the mornings, which has helped me, and maybe that's all we do is pass along to each other what's been passed on to us. But the first thing I say is, Willie, you're a human being, and you're an alcoholic. Good morning. I want to remind myself that primarily I'm a human being. I haven't had any alcohol in my system in 29 years. Now, I'm not cured of alcoholism. You know that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm saying I haven't had any alcohol in my system in 29 years. Damn, I almost told the truth, didn't I? Then they're going to let me back in Texas. But the alcohol hadn't been there, but the human being has. And that's what I'm likely to have more problems with now. I never forget that my main problem in life will always be that alcohol. But the thing that can get me back to that alcohol is to take my human beingness and let it get out of control. Because most of my reactions and feelings are those of a human being. We don't think and feel too much different when we get straightened out and get alcohol out of our systems and get dried out and everything. We don't really think all that different. I thought for so many years that, you know, and they were using the expression for such a long time and still do, alcoholic-like, or as a typical alcoholic, I did such and so. And if you peel all that shell off of it, you did it because you're a very typical human being. And it is typical for any human being, even little kids, when they're running down a school corridor, you know, they're not really running that fast to get to class. They're just having a running race down the hall. And kid run into you. And we'll, you know, grab them and say, look where you're going. And they'll turn around and say, he pushed me. So it's always easier to turn and say that somebody else is at fault. We're not at fault. Because that little kid's not being typical alcoholic. He's being a typical human being. He doesn't want to be responsible for running slam-bast into the teacher. So he turns around, and because little Johnny was chasing him back here, then he blames little Johnny. So we have to be aware of that when we're looking at step 8. To not turn around and say, I wouldn't have done this if he hadn't have made me do it. Down at the bottom of the page on 78, it says, when listing the people we had harmed, most of us hit another solid obstacle. We got a pretty severe shock when we realized that we were preparing to make a face-to-face admission of our wretched conduct to those we had hurt. It has been embarrassing enough when in confidence we had admitted these things to God, to ourselves, and to another human being. But the prospect of actually visiting or even writing the people concerned now overwhelmed us, especially when we remembered in what poor favor we stood with most of them. There are cases, too, where we have damaged others who were still happily unaware of being hurt. Why, we cried, shouldn't bygones just be bygones? Why do we have to think of these people at all? These were some of the ways in which fear conspired with pride. Fear and pride to hinder our making a list of all the people we had harmed. Those are the two things that are going to step in when we start making step 8. When you're helping other people to go through the steps, remember that when they throw those obstacles up there, don't become impatient with them. Remember that the book points out to us that those are the two things that are likely to step in our way. And maybe it was a long time ago when you did step 8. But when you're helping somebody else do it, remember that it's going to be very ordinary for that fear and pride to rear its ugly head. And in so many cases among us gals, I think that it's very... When I got to Alcoholics Anonymous and the men tried to help me in this program, and when they would talk about step 8, they would talk about some of the things that Charlie and Joe were talking about this morning. Debts, money they had stolen, business partnerships that had gotten messed up, trouble with the IRS. And see, so many of us women didn't have any of those things. I had never had to steal any money. That was circumstances. That was no doing of my own. But I worked all the time I was drinking. I had money of my own. I had never had to misappropriate anybody's funds. I wasn't making out the income tax, so I never had cheating on my income tax. So see, when they talked of these big things, I didn't think that this step 8 was really very important to me. I didn't remember until I really got serious of all the unkind things that I had thought and done towards other women. Things that I wasn't even willing to admit, or I really didn't see until I started looking at these. The harms I had done to other women that happened to get in my way. Teachers that I taught alongside with, that I went out of my way to find fault with, after alcohol had begun doing its job on me and undermining the self-confidence that I had had as a young person, that I had always had. When alcohol started chipping away at this, then I had to find ways to bolster that pride and that feeling about myself. So I'd take a cut at some other, and us gals are good at it. We get real good at it. We're born with it. Because usually we can take somebody, and cut them half in two with one remark. That's one of the things I had to do, was to retrain my tongue. And to teach it not to say things before I thought. Or to cut some other woman down in a very subtle way. That's a real pretty blouse you have on, but I love that pink on you a lot better. Now, you think about that for a minute. That's an underhanded compliment if I ever heard one. What you're telling her is that she really doesn't look all that good that day. That she looked better when she wore the other. It just makes you feel a little bit better. I'm glad that I don't have to do those things anymore. And of course, a lot of the things that I did were a lot more serious than that. As far as my human relationships with the people that I worked with, the people that I met on the street, the people that I came in contact with. Those are some of the harms that I had done that I couldn't really go back because we had been moving all of those years, and they wouldn't have the slightest idea where to find those people. But what I could do was to try to become a better human being. And when I made this list, I had to put some general people on there. Be kinder to other women, period. I had to put on there other women. And then to make sure that I understood within my own self that the only way, when my list was made, and with that other women on there, that the only way that I could do that was to be kinder to all the other women that I met for the rest of my life. As kind as I possibly could. It was so easy to exclude because it didn't get into those big categories that the men had. Bottom of page 79. Though in some cases we cannot make restitution at all, and in some cases action ought to be deferred, we should nevertheless make an accurate and really exhaustive survey of our past life as it has affected other people. In many instances we shall find that though the harm done others has not been great, the emotional harm we have done ourselves has. I see, all the time I was cutting another woman down, I was cutting down the woman in me. The more I lost respect for other women, the more I lost respect for this woman. Very deep, sometimes quite forgotten, damaging emotional conflicts persist below the level of consciousness. At the time of these occurrences, they may actually have given our emotions violent twists which have since discolored our personalities and altered our lives for the worse. While the purpose of making restitution to others is paramount, it is equally necessary that we extricate from our examination of our personal relations every bit of information about ourselves and our fundamental difficulties that we can see. And we can see most of them if we're looking hard enough. Since defective relations with other human beings has nearly always been the immediate cause of our woes, including our alcoholism, no field of investigation could yield more satisfying and valuable rewards than this one. Calm, thoughtful reflection upon personal relations can deepen our insight. We can go far beyond those things which were superficially wrong with us to see those flaws which were basic, flaws which sometimes were responsible for the whole pattern of our lives. Thoroughness, we have found, will pay, and pay handsomely. We will next ask ourselves what we mean when we say that we have harmed other people. What kinds of harm do people do one another anyway? To define the word harm in a practical way, we might call it the results of instincts in collision, which cause physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual damage to people. If our tempers are consistently bad, we arouse anger in others. And I really don't have a right to ruin anybody else's day. I really don't have that right. I don't have the right to arouse anger in another person. If we lie or cheat, we deprive others not only of their worldly goods, but of their emotional security and peace of mind. The lying that I was doing was destroying my man. It was destroying this man. Some of the things, my behavior during drinking wasn't destroying him as much as the lies that he was having to live with. Because how do you live with a woman that lies to you? About anything. You can't build a marriage on lies. And the emotional stress, that was a harm I had done this man. And I had to know I hadn't done any great, big, momentous things. But what's more big and momentous than hurting another human being that loves you? So I couldn't really excuse that away. We really issue them an invitation to become contemptuous and vengeful. If our sex conduct is selfish, we may excite jealousy, misery, and a strong desire to retaliate in kind. And as Joe and Charlie touched on, they talked mainly from the men angle, but you gals know how we can use sex. And I realize that I must never ever do that again. We can use our sex, just being a woman, in a situation that I should be sitting down and discussing with my husband. I must not use any of my womanly wiles on him to convince him that I'm right and he's wrong. Tears just tear my man up. And I know I can cry and get him to look at whatever I'm trying to get him to see differently. But see, that's the way I must not use my sex anymore. Because that's what I'm doing. And I know, I knew what I was doing when I was doing it. I must not put him on hold in order to get my way about anything. The silent treatment is no longer used around my house. I think he wishes it was. But it's no longer a sexual tool that I use, because women, as Charlie said, we are so good at it. And we are so good at retreating and just letting them wait and using sex as a weapon. And I can't do that anymore, because then I get myself messed up. I may get my way in whatever I started out to get my way about. But if I hold out long enough, I usually do get... We know about that. We know about that. But I can't do that anymore for Willie's sake. I can't use this as a weapon. I have to use it for good. I found that I had robbed my husband of when I put him on my list. And remember, we're just talking about lists. And when I put him on that list, I had to know all the different ways I had robbed him. And so many of the gals that are coming to us now. It's a funny thing. And every woman in here that's been in AA for any length of time have met as many women that lose their husbands after they get here as lose them before they get here. I actually came closer to divorce after I sobered up than I ever did when I was drinking. Because, see, getting back to this wholeness that we've been talking about this weekend takes a while. And I didn't realize that I had to put some things back into my man's life very rapidly that I had taken from him. But I had robbed him of the woman he had married. And even when I sobered up, I had done it in such a somber, hell-bent for China way, those first 3 or 4 years, that I think he had gotten to the point where he wasn't real sure whether he even wanted the new, sober Willie. Because it wasn't anything resembling of what I had been, and no prospect of getting any better. Because, see, he's never been to an AA meeting. He read the big book. And like I say, that's when he closed it, handed it to me, and said, "You got a problem, you better solve it." So he didn't know about all the progress I was trying to make. I knew that I had to make some progress pretty quickly. And the one thing I could do for him that could undo some of the harms and the games that I had played with him, that could undo it very rapidly, quicker than any tool. We leave this tool on the shelf too long, I think, some of us, the gals. And it's understandable, because we do come in here so hurt and so beaten. And we leave this golden tool sitting there on the shelf that we can undo with so beautifully. And that's our tool of our sense of humor. A man loves a happy woman. All of you men. Nothing is more worrisome than a somber, down-in-the-mouth, bent-for-hell China woman that never smiles, never makes you feel like that you are king of the walk. Because that's what you want to feel like, and that's good. I hope you always feel that way, because that's what I consider you. And I needed to put my man back up there where he could know that I was happy married to him, and that I was glad he loved me. But I couldn't just tell him that, "Honey, I'm so glad you stuck with me during all my alcohol." He got so sick of that. He needed some joy in his life too. He needed that gal that, woke up smiling. He needed a gal that knew how to laugh again. And as many of you know that have heard my tape or my story in some way, I found a way to do this. And it was the joy of the beginning of my sobriety, was when I got my sense of humor back. When Rose told me that day, "My dear Lord Willie, when are you going to get your sense of humor back again? You are so serious, honey. You must make Si very uncomfortable." That's my husband. And so this was when I had his name on that list, this was one of the things I had robbed him of. Laughter. You know, when two people can sit and laugh together the most of the time, then they can sure as business get through any hardship that they have to go through as a couple. If during a deep, heavy discussion about something, if you can poke in just a little bit of fun, it does more good than all the deep therapy that you can possibly have. Because, you know, two people laughing are on their way to most anything that you want it to be. Two people talking very seriously about something get all bogged down in words. You know, that's something that laughter doesn't fool with. I love to hear people laugh. That was something I could give. So any of you gals that are wondering, you know, after I've told my husband or my mate that I'm sorry, then that's it. He ought to just take it from there and let me grow at my own pace. Well, let me tell you something. Your marriage is important. Your relationships are important. If you feel like, okay, now Willie's talking to all the married gals and not talking to me. No, you know what I'm talking about. Because you have men in your life. If you don't right now, wait 15 minutes. We have a coach down in Texas named Tom Landry, and he always, one of the first things he puts up when his football team comes in and reports for training, he puts a sign right up on the blackboard, and it says, "Think lucky. If you fall in a pond, check your back pockets for fish." So if you don't have one, walk around, you know, and you'll get one. Okay, let's run on very quickly to step 9. We've made our list. And I'm not going in depth with that. If you're at that stage, then read that chapter very thoroughly, because Charlie and Joe laid it out for you. And the 12 and 12 just gives you a little further explanation. Step 9, after we've made that list, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And there we have to be very, very careful, gals. Very careful. 29 years later, my husband still does not know the whole story. And that's the way it's going to stay. I hope. Because I'm not going to tell him. And in a serious vein, of course I'm not going to tell him anything that would hurt him. I hurt him enough. And when I looked at that amends, I figured out all of the things I could put back into this man's life. But I couldn't look at any way that I would pull something else away from him. So I had to pick and choose those things that I wanted to make direct amends to him about, and to make sure that they didn't harm him or others. I think in that first paragraph, it tells us what we need to have. Good judgment, a careful sense of timing, courage, and prudence. These are the qualities we shall need when we take step 9. Those 4 things. As we have made the list of people we had harmed, have reflected carefully upon each instance, and have tried to possess ourselves of the right attitude in which to proceed, we will see that the making of direct amends divides those we should approach into several classes. Joe and Charlie have gone into this for us. There's some that we want to put off. There's some that we want to do immediately. There's some in the maybe list, and there's some in the never list. Just get started if you haven't started. Or if you're helping someone with their steps, get them started by giving them that pen and pencil and say, just make the list first, because that's all 8 requires of us. We can go wham-bam through step 8. And step 9 can be organized in such a way that in God's time and with our careful, good judgment, our sense of timing, the courage, and the prudence, that we can put these things in our life in order. Because, you know, at the end of step 9, and if you will take time to read in your 12 and 12 what it says further about step 9. But I think one important thing is that after step 9 in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and this they've been pointed out to you too, that's where the promises appear. So get those people through step 9. Because in the big book, that's where the promises are stated. After step 9, not after the inventory and the admission step or any of that, but after step 9. After we have made our direct amends to as many of those as possible, using the good judgment, the sense of timing, the courage, and the prudence. And as I pointed out, there's so many promises, not only in the positive way, but in the negative way. They promise us what's going to happen to us. And not always that we're going to get drunk. I've seen some people walking around that have 25 years of sobriety. And if they're happy with it, that's fine. I'm glad they're sober. Dear God, I don't want them drunk. But I also don't want their brand of sobriety. I don't want it. I want to get all the promises that are scattered throughout both of these books. I want to get all the joy, all the comfortable feeling about life. You know that I haven't lived 29 years without problems and grief and trauma in my life. That doesn't make sense. But there's not one thing that has ever happened to me that this program of Alcoholics Anonymous hadn't stood by my side and gotten me through. And that's a great faith to go through life, knowing that I don't have to go through it alone. I have tools on my shelf that I can take down when they're needed. I don't always take them down real quick. I don't always take them down quick enough sometimes. I don't always do what I'm supposed to do. But as long as I'm in there looking for fish, I'm doing okay. But I can put the things in people's lives, being there aren't a lot of the people that I harmed emotionally, that I harmed maybe just for a split second. I've screwed up their day for them by saying something unkind and changing their outlook on the day, making them feel a little bit unsure of themselves. Say, taking a young teacher and pointing out very carefully all the mistakes she was making. See, I didn't have to do it that way. I could have approached that girl with help in mind. How can I help you? Let me use some of these years that I've been flat-footing it around classrooms. Use me, hon. I will share anything with you, instead of very carefully pointing out to her, this you did not do right. That hurt her. She must have loved teaching, or she wouldn't have been going into it. You don't go into it for the money. And here I was, and those are the kind of harms that I had to look at, and count those as harms too. Because I had to remember, but I couldn't go back now and find those girls. They were scattered all over the United States. So I had to make sure that from that time on, when I got through with that step 9 and I saw that those other women were on that list, that I couldn't go back and make direct amends to. I couldn't write them. I couldn't do any of this directness. But I could do the only thing that I could do, and that was to make sure that I was never unkind to another woman again. Not deliberately. There's a step in my program that if I do it accidentally, if I accidentally hurt any other women in my orbit that I meet in my daily work, if I do, there's a step in my program later on that tells me what to do. And that's to tell them I'm sorry very promptly. Very promptly. So in step 9, I can finish up. That's the last look back at the past we're going to look at. Isn't that great? That's why I wanted to go on and get through 8 and 9, because now there's no more looking back. We don't look back anymore. And that is so good. in our step 10, we start with, okay, now we go. And this is the exciting part of it. The other is soul searching, and there's a lot of pain in those first 9 steps. But let me promise you that if you hadn't gotten through them yet, promise you what you're going to get when you get there. You'll have those promises in one way or the other. You'll have the promises that fit you. And then with step 10, you can take your program and go with it. Then you're not going backwards anymore. You're not looking back over your shoulders. If we've made a thorough job of these 9, and even if we've just done the best job we could, we can start with 10 and start to grow. And if we see where one of the others need patching up a little bit, we can always go back and just patch that one. You know, a tire with a good patch on it will run a long, long way. So we can run back and patch up if we see, but don't stop dead still just because you think I haven't done it well enough, or I got to take another 4. Maybe it's just as well if you go back and look at it and just put some patches in there for a while. Because if you go to the 4th or the 5th or any place and set up a tent and live there, then you're never going to get to the joy of step 10, and that means go. And that's the one we want to get to. Get that past taken care of. If you do have to go back, that's no big problem. Take a short run back, patch it up, keep going. But from now on, let's go forward. Love it, and I'll see you in the morning. But see, the fact that I didn't know what I was doing on the time element, then we got all mixed up on it, that accounted for it. Come on, gals, some of you come and share with me. There's a mic over here and a mic over here. Now, we'll start calling some names, so you better come on. Some of you men, come on, share with us. Which way are you going? Great. Hi, Felix.
Seems I'm making a habit of coming up here and talking, but I do have some things to share and of my own personal experiences.
Good.
One especially in this particular area of making amends, and it was something that really didn't turn out the way I really wanted it to or thought it was going to. And this was in the area of my marriage. We went to counseling after I came into AA, and marriage counseling recommended separation and divorce. So I was feeling pretty bitter about this woman that I had to leave, and we parted company, and I was living up to my commitments and with my support and so on. But down deep inside, I felt that I had to say or do something to this woman. And I can remember one day being over at the house, and I usually dropped in the support money and had a visit with the children. And this particular day, the children weren't there. So I thought it was an opportunity to make direct face-to-face amends to this woman. And I said to her, I wish you all the happiness and contentment and peace of mind you can have in this life, the same as I would like for myself. And unfortunately, we couldn't have it together. Now, this woman never drank, and 4-letter words were never used in the home. And she responded with, "You're an effing liar," And it was like a thunderbolt struck me. But by this time, I think I had enough strength and courage in my life through God that I just stood still. And when she got done, I said to her, you can do what you like with these wishes I bestowed upon you, but I honestly and sincerely meant what I said. And I turned and I walked out and I got in the car and I backed out of the driveway and started driving down the street. And I realized the car was about 2 feet off the ground. And I felt so good that I really did sincerely and honestly mean what I said. And that amend was mainly for myself and not her. And I realized that this time that all amends don't go the way Felix wants them to. But it was to my satisfaction and to my growth that it did turn out that way. I didn't react to her with her comment to me like I would have in the past. And I calmly stated to her my sincerity and left and felt real good about it. Thank you again for listening.
Is it okay? My name is Tom. I'm an alcoholic. I'm from Sudbury, Ontario. And I want to tell you, I ran into a fella who's a well-known member around Sudbury. I think he's been sober about 6 years or so, to say the least. Not taking his inventory. I was rather shocked when he told me that last month, he told me that he bought a big book. Anyway, I'm not any further ahead. I've been sober 8 years for a measurement of time, and I've had a big book since I sobered up. As a matter of fact, they threw it at me in a treatment center, and I wasn't very far behind this fellow. I might as well not have had one. Now, I've been chosen to believe a lot of lies. Most of them were about myself. Anyway, like, hey, Willie, I love you. You put it right on it for me, because I've been sitting here taking notes and trying to get the positives and the negatives in the inventories, and I've been listening very intently, and I've been saying, Jesus, come on, Tom. After 8 years, if I stayed sober one day at a time, I had to do something right. So, although, I guess that's what you call banging your head in the wall. No, I'm just talking for me only. And I have a rare breed of sobriety. I've been a real maverick. I've had women for sponsors. I've related to women more than men. I was even considering, I can get along with this so good. I was even considering some kind of a sex change. Ha ha. Or maybe I'm going the other way. I don't know. But what the whole thing boils down to is just like you said. I put down here, hey, KISS, keep it simple, stupid. Take a run back, patch it up, and keep on going. Because I think that in a loving way, I belong here, I want to be here, and that's why I'm here. And thank you all very much.
I'm an alcoholic. Hi, Willie. This amends, I want to share something that took place about 2 weeks ago. And if there's anybody that's in this room that doesn't believe in miracles, I know this is truly a miracle for me. I sobered up April 84. And through ill health, I was forced to move back to Sudbury where I grew up. And 2 weeks ago, I had this silly compulsion to go to a meeting in Espanola about an hour away. And the person that I was forcibly pushing into taking me, because that's such is my method of operation, kept saying, why Espanola? It's an hour away from town. I've driven all the way up from Toronto just to spend a weekend up here, and So anyway, gave in. We went to the meeting. The long and the short is I started to remember some things. I was raped when I was 17 years old while I was unconscious, and all I remembered was that rape. While I was sitting at this meeting and throughout the entire evening, I started to remember the entire circumstances of that relationship. It unfolded before me like watching a television movie. And what I realized was what I did to this person prior to what he did. Neither one of us drank until we met each other. When we were through with each other, we were both drunks. And that took less than 6 months to take place, so we're obviously pretty emotional, damaged people. What we did to each other was pretty terrible, but I was the one who started the ball rolling. I set it in motion. What I later realized was in 1962, this man came to see me and made an amends. And if you don't believe in miracles, I've lived to get here and got the message 22 years later. So it works.
It works.